Hello and welcome back to the first video of my second season of FPL content. I'm a little bit late to the party, but not without good reason. I've spent the last couple of months building some new tools for the channel, and that will eventually be made available to all of you. But we'll go into that in a little bit more detail later in the video. So I have had a pretty good chance to play around with all the prices and constructing various drafts and whatnot, and I've come to the conclusion that as of last year, I think I had my best weeks of the season when I managed to squeeze 3 premiums into the squad, which was actually quite viable last year with the ridiculously cheap pricing model that FPL went with. It was ludicrous, actually. I mean, having players from Arsenal that went on to have massive seasons at like 6 to 6.5 million was just way too cheap. They ended up in everyone's squads, and all the teams ended up looking very similar, which made it incredibly difficult to claw back any points that were lost early in the season. But with this year's pricing model, I'm actually really happy with it. I think there's a couple of little issues here and there, but on the whole, I think they nailed most of the prices across the game, which should make for hopefully a lot more diverse range of strategy, player options, and whatnot. So, having had a play around with all of the prices, I am almost certainly going to be going with Kane at the start of the season to sit alongside Haaland up front and see if we can climb the ranks that way. Just before we get into that, I have created a mini league this season. I did have a few inquiries about that last year, so quick shout out to Hardy Rayhan 5634 for prompting me to do so late in the season. I have created that for everyone, so if you would like to join and follow my team and compete against other listeners to the channel, there is a link in the description below. So, to jump right into it, the 2 premium strategy I'm going with is Haaland and Kane without Trent Alexander-Arnold. I would almost put Trent up as a premium. He's obviously definitely a premium in the defender price bracket, but across the game you could almost say that squeezing him in is almost like half a premium. Going in when he goes in at the back. Now, having Kane and Haaland is a fair whack of the budget, and so this is a team that is without Trent Alexander-Arnold from the start. I'm not saying that I'm discounting him all year, but to set up this kind of structure, it means that I'll be running with either a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-3. Now, if I did want to squeeze Trent and Alexander-Arnold in alongside Haaland and Kane, then I would probably be looking at something like a 4-4-2 formation. But considering that I'm not even looking at Trent until about game week 5, and that's because Liverpool have to go away to Chelsea game week 1, away to Newcastle game week 3, and a home game to Aston Villa in game week 4. They do have that really tasty fixture in game week 2 against Bournemouth, but from a defensive point of view, I believe Liverpool could quite easily concede in all 3 of those games, and if I'm going to be paying 8.0 million for a premium defender, I would like a bit more assurity of clean sheets, especially from whenever I put him into the squad. But also, I mean, Trent had a bit of a mixed match season last year. He had very quiet first half of the season, but when he went and played, Klopp put him in a bit more of an inverted role where he stepped into midfield and kind of played this similar to a Stones role at City. It's way more effective though. He looked absolutely dangerous in that role. he looks like he could pick up all sorts of attacking returns all over the place. So he is 100% probably going to make it into my team after about the first month or so. But I do want to have a little bit of a look at how Szoboszlai affects Trent's inverted wing-back role. I'm wondering, and of course the set pieces, I'm wondering if he may just cover that role himself and leave Trent as a bit more of a traditional wing-back. So we're going to be running it with a 3-5-2 strategy. That's with a dead 4.5 million striker spot, so this player, we're not going to be pulling on him at all. The second spot on the bench will also be a 4.0 million defender, who we are also not looking to play pretty much at all. We shouldn't really be going down into the second spot on our bench in the early season, because obviously everyone's got a wild card. We all build these very strong teams. Hopefully we're running with some not very risky players in terms of minutes on the pitch, and so it'd be very unlucky for us to be having to go 2 spots deep into the bench at the start of the season. Now obviously as the season progresses and injuries come up and whatnot, that second spot does need to be a little bit more well thought out. But from the outset I will be running with only 8.5 million for the last a total of 8.5 million spent for the last 2 spots on my bench, and with that let's just jump right into it. So first man, and we'll go from the bench first. We're just chucking in Woodrow. Like I said, dead spot, 4.5 million striker. I don't even know if this guy's going to play. He is just super low owned. I do not want to be losing value on whoever I put in here. Yes, I could go with a 4.5 million option that could potentially get some minutes off the bench, not off my bench, but actually off the bench in the Premier League squad that he plays for. But those players tend to be a little bit more highly owned in Premier League, in the Fantasy Premier League game, and they do tend to drop in value. And like I said, I don't even plan to be using the second spot on my bench very often, let alone the third spot. So Woodrow could be anyone. I don't really care about this spot. He's just going in as a way to hold onto the funds. And the 4.0 million defender spot that I am currently looking to go with is Baldock. There are a couple of options in the 4 million price point this year that looks like they could get some consistent minutes. There's Bayer and Bell, who are the other two who look like they could be a little bit nailed on, but they are both, I believe, centre backs that have very little attacking threat whatsoever. I mean, it's 4.0 million spots, so we can't be asking for a hell of a lot, but Baldock is a wing back and looks like he could also be a little bit more assured of starts. So at the moment we've just chucked him into the squad. Now I should probably mention also at this point, this is in no way a locked in team. Parts of the team are relatively locked in. I am pretty confident that, for example, I will be going with Haaland and Kane, assuming Kane doesn't get sold or go overseas or whatever. But there will be a whole bunch of spots around the squad that are kind of in here as tentative players to scout across the pre-season. And of course Baldock will be one of them. Now in the 4.5 million spot up front, I should also mention that Balogun at Arsenal could potentially get a move to a different Premier League club, and if he does, he probably will go to that club for an assurity of minutes, and we could end up with a 4.5 million striker that is actually consistently playing. And if that is the case, then I will most likely be switching to a 3-4-3 formation and jumping on that Balogun option in that price point. So to fill out the last spot on my bench, now this spot's actually pretty important because we will be calling on this spot as a bit of a rotation option in defense, but also if one of our players randomly misses out, gets injured in the pre-game warm-up or anything like that, we do want someone who's a little bit assured of starts. And at the moment, I've gone with Botman, 4.5 million. Now this is probably a little bit on the cheap side in terms of the pricing structure this year. It's a Champions League defence. Botman is about as nailed as it gets in that Newcastle starting lineup. He has literally no attacking threat to speak of. I mean, he does get forward, but for some reason he just never seems to get involved in any of the set pieces that come into the box. But for a relatively good shot at a clean sheet at 4.5 million coming off the bench, he looks like a bit of a no-brainer at this point in time. The only caveat I will put with that is I may look at bringing Trippier into the squad a little bit later in the season, and if that is the case, I'm not entirely sure if I also want Botman on my bench as well. I'm not sure if I would really want to double up on the spot, but for now I think Botman is a relatively safe pick to just chuck in. Now, to clear out the rest of the bench, I always start the season spending no more than 8.5 million on my keeper pairings. So I usually go with a 4 million keeper which has the best shot at potentially getting a start at some point in the season, and that puts Areola at the top of the list this year. And with the other spot going to a 4.5 million goalkeeper that is playing for a team that he will hopefully get a whole bunch of saves, because that's how keepers tend to build up their points, and plays for a team that hopefully won't score too many goals as well. I mean, if the team wins like 1-0 or even maybe 2-0, then the keeper from that club could jump into the bonus points, and that's how these keepers end up coming to the top of the chart. So Raya last year did amazing at Brentford. He could potentially be moving away from Brentford. There is some rumours about a potential transfer for him, and if that is the case, then Flecken at Brentford could be the starting number one for a Brentford defence that looked pretty sound for the second half of the season last year. Now this spot could also be Pickford. Everton have a great run of opening fixtures. However, I don't really like Pickford. I don't think he's a very good keeper, and the Everton defence I just don't really want any part of unless they have some sort of massive turnaround in terms of what they ended up doing last year. So, obviously, we've got Haaland in the squad. He's owned by 85.8% of all the game. He is in everyone's team and will be going nowhere from my squad. I started without him last year. Huge mistake. Sent me well down the rankings to start the year off, and it was just a clawback ever since. We will not be making that mistake this year, obviously, having seen how well he did last year. And given the title of the video, I am running with Kane. Obviously, we will chuck Kane in up front. Now, for those of you who were watching the channel last year, you would have probably heard me talk about the clinicality of Kane throughout the season last year. And not without... I said that not without, it wasn't just something that I was just chucking out into the ether. He is actually a very good finisher. Now, I mentioned a little bit earlier in the intro that I have spent some time building some tools for the channel. Now, this is a website that I am currently working on called FPLFanatic. It is in beta, so like I said, I've only spent the last couple months on this. The data in there is accurate. I've only got a couple of modules running at the moment, but it is at a stage where I can jump in and show you what we have to play with. So This is the player analysis model. It's just a way to search through all the players and compare various FPL stats that are important for building your squads from the outset and obviously throughout the season. What I've done here is just sorted by the goals minus XG. So this is basically showing the best finishes in the game, which is basically what this stat is. So last year, Kane had a total XG across the whole season of 20.95 games. 20.95 goals across 38 games. Actually managed to score 30 of them. That puts him with the difference of goals minus XG at a positive 9.5, i.e. he scored 9 more goals than his XG indicated, showing that he is a very good finisher. That actually puts him ahead of Haaland. Haaland had an XG of 28.54, so he had 8 more goals expected of him throughout the season and managed to come away with breaking all the records and scoring 36 goals in the Premier League. But the difference there is a positive 7.46. I almost said only a positive 7.46, and that is not at all what I meant. That is still an amazing rate of finishing, but that just goes to show that Man City generate a lot more opportunities for Haaland. Haaland is a very good finisher, but if Kane had have been given the same amount of XG chances, he would have come away with probably more than 36 goals. Now, Kane finished the season on 263 points, where Haaland managed to get 272 with his 36 goals and 9 assists, compared to Kane's 30 goals and 9 assists. Now, Spurs were pretty terrible last year as a team. They weren't really gelling, things were just not working out at all for them, and Kane still managed to get just a mere 9 points less than Haaland, who was just the default captain for everyone in FPL last year. Now this is why I want to fit Kane into the team. Yes, I am probably not ever going to captain him, or I will maybe captain him very, very, very rarely, as I don't think I will be going against Haaland. But at 263 points from a Spurs team that didn't play very well, if Spurs do any sort of improvement this year, he could be vying for that golden boot this season, and that's just FPL points for our teams, right? So if we order this player list by points, you can see Haaland clearly at the top, Kane in second place, and Salah was in third place, which is actually quite far behind. So 239 compared to Kane's 263. What is that? That's like 24 odd points. So there is a little bit of a difference between them. And then we fall off to Odegaard down at the 212, Rashford 200, and then we go sub 200s from there. So yeah, clinical Kane only 9 points behind Haaland. Salah was 33 points behind Haaland, and so starting the season with Kane looks to be my way to differentiate the team from what looks to be the template out there in Twitter and on the YouTube content creators. So the other reason that I want to start with Kane from the outset, so this is the other module that I have built for this website. It's a fixture ticker. It's a bit more of an advanced fixture ticker than probably what you are used to seeing from the other applications out there, so I'll give it a little bit of a very quick overview. We have a couple of options here. It's showing the last 5 game weeks for the FPL season, so you'll notice that a lot of these figures don't actually add up to 5. Chelsea was 1 win, 2 draws, 4 losses, and 0 clean sheets from the last 5 game weeks of the season last season, meaning they actually played 7 games in the last 5, didn't keep any clean sheets, compared to Man City's 6 wins, 1 draw, 1 loss, and 3 clean sheets. That's what the first column is. We've got the table position, so you can just order by, well, currently last season's table position, but it will be updated as the season progresses, so you can kind of see what's going on there. The games they've played, the goals they've scored, the XG that they have created as a team. Interestingly enough, Arsenal actually generated more XG than Man City across the season last year. The goals conceded, as you can see, we're still working on this. We've got Sheffield, Burnley and Luton at the top of the list because they didn't concede any goals in the Premier League last season. I need to fix that, but from the rest of the figures you can see Man City with the fewest goals conceded alongside Newcastle, and then Arsenal conceded 10 more goals than City, ordered by expected goals conceded and of course clean sheets. Now when we do all this ordering, obviously the opponents on the right are not taken into account at all, but we do have this sort by X game weeks at the top here. It's currently defaulting to 8 because it's the start of the season, and we do want to plan our teams for a majority of game weeks. I mean, we're going to build a 15-man squad. If we only use 1 transfer a week, in 8 weeks' time we still should have at least 7 players from our initial starting squad in the team, and so we always want to plan out a little bit further in advance. You can change this to however many weeks you want to order by, but I've also got a different thing in here that shows the game weeks to view. So you can see here that we've got 10 game weeks on the screen. The last 2 are a little bit, we've used an opaque setting in HTML just to show that they are not being counted as part of the calculation of who's got the easiest run of fixtures or not. But sometimes you might be looking at something like the first 4 game weeks, Chelsea's top of the list, Man City second, and you might just want to see what the next fixtures are coming up for those various teams. So running with Kane, you can see that Spurs is currently 4th on this list on the fixture ticker. Now, there are a whole bunch of fixture tickers out there with various settings, and weightings applied to the teams. I think a couple of the fixture tickers have actually made it a little bit of a they've got the Chelsea rating a little bit they've put them down as like a middling team, whereas I've actually boosted Chelsea's difficulty rating up to be in line with the likes of Newcastle, Liverpool, Manchester United. So the order of the teams here in terms of fixture difficulty will be a little bit different to the other fixture tickers that you will see out there. I guess you'll just have to figure out whether or not you think I'm more right or the other fixture tickers are more accurate. We will be adding in a way to adjust those later if you so see the need. But anyway, starting with Kane from the outset with Brentford away, it's not too bad of a game. Manchester United at home's a bit tricky, but then there's Bournemouth away, Burnley away, and Sheffield United away. Now, if we actually compared that to a Liverpool, the other thing you can do in here is you can select which teams you want to see. So if you want to do things like compare rotation pairings and seeing how the games line up, you can see that Liverpool's start to the season is a bit tricky. Chelsea away, great game against Bournemouth at home, but then Newcastle away and Aston Villa at home. Those 4 are not amazing for Trent, as I've already said, but also I think I would prefer to go Kane instead of Salah from the outset. However, as of game week 6 or 7, I may be looking to switch from Kane to Salah. I'll go through that in a little bit more detail as well as we get through the video. So those are the tools that I will be running through and using in the future videos coming out. And just thought I'd go through and show those quickly right now. So back to the team. Next on the list is James from Chelsea. Now, Chelsea are currently my pick as the underpriced, undervalued assets in the game. This is largely because Chelsea had a terrible season last year in terms of Chelsea's normal Premier League performances. This has resulted in some pretty cheap prices for some very good FPL assets. James being one of them, down at 5.5 million. He could also be Chilwell, who managed to score in his preseason game at the moment. But if we just go back to the fixture ticker quickly, you can see that Chelsea, although they've got a really hard first game against Liverpool at home, they are top of the fixture ticker for the first 8 game weeks, with a run of West Ham away, Luton at home, Nottingham Forest at home, Bournemouth away, Aston Villa at home, Fulham away, and Burnley away across the first 8 game weeks of the season. That is an insane run of fixtures, and I want to be starting with Chelsea from the outset, as I do not want to be wasting transfers on getting them in, say, game week 2 or 3, when I think most other teams will start to look at Chelsea assets with that run of Luton, Forest and Bournemouth across game weeks 3, 4 and 5. James hasn't played any preseason minutes yet. He is, as of yesterday or the day before, on a plane to, I think Chelsea are playing in the US at the moment. He's on the plane out there to go and get some preseason minutes under his belt. So obviously we'll be keeping a close eye on how he's looking. Is he injured? What is actually going on at Chelsea with Pochettino in charge? He is a wing-back manager. Well, not really a wing-back manager. He usually sets up in a 4-2-3-1 when he was in the Premier League with Spurs in 2019, I think was the last time he was here. But he made massive use of his fullbacks that were getting forward quite often and get very involved in the attack. James has got a ruthless shot on him, an amazing delivery. When he was actually playing as a wing back, he looked like an out-and-out attacker. Very similar to Chilwell on the other side. Both players have a very similar set of attributes playing in those various positions. Chilwell with the left foot, James with the right foot. So it could be either of these two players. But we've just got a placeholder in the squad for a Chelsea defender. So next on the list is Estupiñán, who I think is the highest. So if we just go back to the player analysis, so this is ordered by team selected by percent. We've got Haaland at the top, Saka the second most selected currently as of this morning, and Estupiñán is the top selected defender in the game at 5.0 million. Brighton have a very nice opening 3 fixtures of the season of Luton at home, Wolves away and West Ham at home. These look like pretty good defensive games for Brighton, and Estupiñán is the most attacking defender at Brighton. He was getting very far forward last year, scored some great goals, got in and amongst the assists, and is why he is so highly owned in the game already. Very good price point for Estupiñán as well at 5 million. I think 4.5 million, which is what he was last year, would have been too cheap. He would have ended up in just everyone's squad, and 5.5 million probably would have been too expensive, probably putting him out of most people's teams. And so I think the Fantasy Premier League have done really well with that price point there. However, Brighton's fixtures do take a bit of a dive after game week 3, and so we may be needing to sell Estupiñán early on in the season. So I'm not entirely certain if I'm going to be starting with Estupiñán or not, but for the moment he is in the squad. Next on the list is Gabriel from Arsenal, who was the top ranked defender by XG. So if I just order this player list by XG and select only the defenders, Gabriel is at the top of the list, weirdly enough, followed by Fabian Schär at Newcastle, who I did not actually put down as a massive attacking defensive option, but there you go. Gabriel, Sharp, me, Tarkowski, Botman as the top XG pundits. Now, I did mention that Botman has no attacking threat. It looks like he was actually offered up quite a bit of attacking threat in terms of defenders at 2.75 XG across the whole season. That's not very much. It's 0.08 across 38 games, and he didn't manage to convert any of it. He did manage 2 assists. Both assists were super jammy goal mouth scrambles. I did actually own Botman when he picked up both those assists, and I was just couldn't believe that I'd actually managed to get an attacking return from the lad. So, although he is looking quite high up this list here, he is not at all someone that I would be relying on. Now, with Arsenal, Declan Rice has obviously shifted across. He is part of the squad. He is an amazing signing for Arsenal. He is going to shore up the defensive midfield spots and should shield that defensive unit a whole bunch more. So hopefully what this will mean is we will actually get a lot more clean sheet returns from our Arsenal assets with Declan Rice in the squad. However, we should also mention that Jurriën Timber has also been signed for Arsenal, and he could have a massive impact on the squad. I do not suspect that he's going to take Gabriel's spot, as Timber, I think, is a left-footed centre-back, which is where Saliba is currently placing. For all of you that have Saliba in your Game Week 1 squads, you'll need to keep a very close eye on how Timber affects his minutes from the early outset of the season. Now, Gabriel is in there and is probably the least assured defender that I am going to be starting with. I do not really like Arsenal's fixtures from a defensive standpoint. They've got a great game week 1 at home to Nottingham Forest. Then they're away to Crystal Palace. Could concede there. They're at home to Fulham. Well, if Mitrovic goes over to the Saudi League, we could probably give Arsenal a clean sheet there. If Mitrovic is in the Fulham squad, then, I don't know, maybe get a clean sheet there. Then they have Manchester United at home. Very good game away to Everton, but then a real tricky game at home to Tottenham. Pretty good game away to Bournemouth, and then a really hard game against Man City. So, from a defensive point of view, I'm not in love with the Arsenal fixtures. You can also see if you go a little bit further out, they're then away to Chelsea the very next game after. So, I'm not entirely sure about whether or not I will be running with Gabriel, and depending on how the rest of preseason goes, I may actually end up downgrading Gabriel to one of the Villa lads, Pau Torres or Matty Cash, if Cash happens to cement his place in the squad and actually get a whole bunch of minutes. Both of them are down at 4.5 million, which will give me an extra 0.5 million to spend on the other spots in my squad, and Gabriel may not make it into my squad game week 1. Now, sticking with Arsenal, Saka is probably the first player that I noticed that I thought was underpriced in the game. He should have been at least a £9 million asset. He's listed in the game as 8.5 million. I think they should have at least put him the same price as Rashford. Should have probably been 9 million, but I would have even put him as high as 9.5 million, playing for the best attack in terms of XG compared to last season. He's on pens, and he is absolutely nailed in that Arsenal squad. He has been in every draft that I have created so far and has not left any of them. I will almost certainly be starting with Saka. We don't really need to go into the reasons why. He is just a great player. So next on the list is Mbeumo. Obviously he's not going to be captain. Just chuck the captaincy over there. Mbeumo down at 6.5 million in a Trent-less Brentford could see Mbeumo on penalties, which should probably see Mbeumo on penalties. Brentford's early fixtures are actually pretty good from an attacking standpoint. Like I said last year, Tottenham were woeful, especially in defence last year. So Postecoglou's actually got quite a bit of work to do there to turn around the Tottenham season. So we could see Brentford potentially nabbing some attacking returns in the early stages of the season while Spurs adapt to the new way of how things are going to run at Spurs. Fulham away is okay. Crystal Palace at home is okay. Bournemouth at home is a great game. Newcastle away is a bit tricky, but then Everton at home and Nottingham Forest away. These are all pretty good attacking fixtures for a 6.5 million option that could be on penalties and actually has an extended run of great games. So if we go up to... So all I've done here is I'm changing the start game week to game week 4. Still sorted by the first 8 game weeks, so from game weeks 4 to 11. You actually see that Brentford's second on the fixture ticker. And so ideally I would like... Game week 4 is about when everyone starts to freak out and starts pulling the wildcard button when they realise that they've made mistakes. And so I think at that point, game week 4, you'll probably find a lot of players will be looking... A lot of teams will be looking to bring in some sort of Brentford asset. Mbeumo looks like he's going to be top of that list. And if we look at all players sorted by team selected by percent, you can actually see that Mbeumo is relatively high up. And if we change this to 7 million, midfielders, he's second in the list compared to Mitoma at that price point, or going up to a price point of 7 million. 25% of the game currently owns him compared to Mitoma's 37.5. And now it starts to get a little bit more interesting. So my under the radar pick in Phil Foden. Now Man City's fixtures are ridiculous. They are second top on the ticker with Burnley, Newcastle, okay, Newcastle's tough, Sheffield United, Fulham, West Ham, Nottingham Forest, Wolves, before they have to play Arsenal in game week 8. For last season's champions, that is about as good of a run of fixtures as you are ever going to see, and I would love to find a bit of a nailed on asset in that Pep roulette side. Foden down at 7.5 million. His minutes were a little bit all over the place last year. However, things are a little bit different this year. Gundogan is gone. So there is a central midfield spot up for grabs. Now, Man City have already signed Mateo Kovacic, and he looks like he will probably be the man that fills that void that Gundogan has left. However, that's not completely assured. Last season, the Champions League final, De Bruyne got injured with, I think it was his hamstring? Some sort of tear in one of his muscles. I think it was the hamstring. And it was Phil Foden that came on to replace him in the centre of the park and sparked life into that game. He was the only one who didn't look like he was caught up by the occasion, played really well, and that was after a string of game time where Pep was actually playing him in the centre of the park. So it wasn't just that. So we typically think Foden is usually out on the left competing for that spot with Grealish, which he is still very capable of playing. But towards the end of the season, he did get a few more minutes in the centre of the park and ended up playing the Champions League final in that role and doing very well. So Pep might have turned the corner and looking at Foden and thinking that he may be ready for that role in the centre of the park. Now, central midfield, especially in a team like Man City, is a crucial role. You have to have amazing vision, great touch, great delivery, got to be able to get forward, get back. There's a whole lot going on. It's a very demanding role, and Pep has mentioned that he is not sure in the past whether or not Foden was ready for that. However, actions speak louder than words. He's chucked him in that role in the Champions League final, and so he could quite easily be in the middle of the park instead of Gundogan. But also, De Bruyne is still dealing with that injury that he picked up in the Champions League final and probably won't be ready for the start of the season. So we could see Foden sitting next to Kovacic in the middle of the park. Elsewhere in Man City, though, Mahrez is off to the Saudi league, so there's a spot open on the right wing. It looks like that would probably most likely be Bernardo Silva, but there are of course rumours that he is also leaving, and so we could find that Foden is the go-to utility player in that Man City squad, filling in for Grealish on the left when Pep decides that he doesn't want to play Grealish. He could be used in the middle of the park like he was in the Champions League final with the loss of Gundogan, and with players leaving on the right side of the pitch, he could quite easily be put out there as well. And at 7.5 million with all those attributes, I would love to start the season with Foden if he looks like he is going to nail down one of those spots in the pre-season games. So next on the list in this squad, I have gone with Maddison, who is a great player, who was playing in an absolutely terrible Leicester side last year, and he still managed to pick up some attacking returns and defensive returns. Can't remember exactly how much it was. Maddison. He got 10 goals and 9 assists across 28 starts, which is pretty good going for a side that got relegated. He has moved across to Spurs, and with that move he will be surrounded by way more quality in the Spurs team than was available to him at Leicester. He's got dead balls in the locker, although I do not know how many set pieces he will be on. Kane is also he is probably the first choice free kick taker at Spurs, but Maddison does bring some very good dead ball deliveries, and so he could be on quite a lot of those at Spurs. With the likes of Son and Kane and Kulusevski around him, that front four could cause havoc in the Premier League, and he could also be going quite under the radar in FPL. I don't think he's owned by a hell of a lot. Should have picked that up. 16%. Okay, so it's not too bad. He's above 10%, but you need to have a couple of 6.5, 7.5 million slots in the team if you are going to fit in a second premium. Maddison fits that bill quite well. That leaves me with 6.5 million in the bank for this last spot. Now, I'm not actually planning on using all that money, and this is the one spot that I am the least assured about in this team. It is in fact Enciso down at 5.5 million at Brighton. Now it could also be that I may look at going with someone like Andreas Pereira at 5.5 million, because Mitrovic is, I think he was even found in Saudi Arabia. He's looking to go to the Saudi League, which would put Andreas Pereira on penalties if that is indeed the case, playing in an attacking Fulham side well up the pitch for 5.5 million. Could be Enciso, could be Andreas Pereira, might not be either of them. We will have to wait and see. This is one I'm definitely going to be scouting across the pre-season. There is quite a bit of competition for those forward spots at Brighton, But the reason that I am looking at him so closely is at the end of last season, Enciso managed to get 7 starts in the last 9 games of the season. Now, Brighton had the most hectic end to the season last year. So across the last 5 game weeks, they got 4 wins, 1 draw, and 4 losses, totaling 9 games in 5 game weeks. So that is pretty hectic. We had De Zerbi coming out saying he didn't see how his first choice players were going to be able to play that often. Matoma, March, McAllister were all rotated during this period. But across the last 9 games, Enciso did start 7 of them. And so even though he was flipping around people in and out of the squad during this pretty hectic time, Enciso did manage to pick up quite a few starts, and he did do relatively well. So I do think he has a very good shot at starting in that Brighton squad this season. So that's what the squad looks like. Leaves me 1.0 million in the bank. Now, I will not be starting the season with 1.0 million in the bank. I will definitely be, well, almost definitely be spending at least 0.5 million of that. That will be dependent on how preseason goes, what the minutes are looking like. I could be using that 0.5 million to upgrade. Maybe we look at Foden and he's not getting any preseason minutes. I could take him up to a Martinelli at Arsenal. There's a couple of options of what I could be doing here. However, I did mention way early on that the 2 premium setup could go as a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-3, in which case the Enciso spot would just go to a dead 4.5 million anyone. Doesn't really matter who it is. It's going to be in place of Woodrow up front. And that would leave me 6.5 million to spend on this forward spot. I also mentioned a little bit earlier that I may not be running with Gabriel. I might be downgrading him to one of the Villa lads, which would give me an extra 0.5 million, taking me up to a total of 7 million. Now, there is a couple of interesting options in this third striker spot. The likes of Ferguson at Brighton, the youngster who could be starting the season there. We'll have to keep an eye on him pre-season. Nicholas Jackson over at Chelsea looks like he could also be an interesting option down at 7 million. Manchester United are almost finished with the deal of, is it Rasmus Haaland? I think it's Rasmus. Haaland up front, who could come in quite cheap in and around the 7 to 7.5 million price point at United. He could be a very interesting option. And then there's also Nkunku at Chelsea, slightly more expensive at 7.5 million. I would need to find another 0.5 million somewhere from the squad in order to do that, in addition to downgrading Gabriel if I did want to go that way. But this kind of shows the flexibility of how you can go from a 3-5-2 to a 3-4-3. You just have to burn that 4.5 million spot. Typically, most players in FPL do look to have a playing 4.5 million option in the middle of the park if this is the case. But at the start of the season, we would probably just look to burn it. Now, the last little bit of the video, and I am a little bit conscious of the fact that it is getting a little bit long, 48 minutes already. It is, I suppose, the first video of the season. I was going to be a little bit longer, but a little bit of strategy for you. In game week 4, like I already mentioned, there is a bit of a fixture swing in game week 4. Liverpool, who were way down the list from the start of the season, come to the top of the list in game week 4. I think this will be the point where people start freaking out that they don't have Salah. Looking at Aston Villa, Wolves, West Ham, a tricky game to Tottenham, Brighton away, Everton, Nottingham Forest, Luton, Brentford. I mean, that's just an insane run of fixtures for Liverpool. all those teams out there with a 1 premium setup, just going with Haaland and spreading their funds across the squad, will find it extremely difficult to get Salah in at this point, unless they have specifically planned for it and they don't get hit with any other injuries or players not making squads that they weren't aware of. And so about game week 4 or 5, we could see a whole bunch of wildcards being played in order to bring Salah in. Now, for me, I'm not entirely certain that I am going to actually switch across to Salah at this point, but okay, let's just put someone in here. Let's just say this is, I don't know, Ferguson or someone. Let's just say Ferguson is in here. So in game week 4, if we feel that we want to jump off Kane and actually jump on the Salah bandwagon, even though I don't think I will be, because at this point Kane will have an away fixture to Burnley and then a great home game against the promoted side of Sheffield United. But then they run into Arsenal and Liverpool, and it is at this point that I may start considering it. But starting from the outset with 2 premiums means to get to Salah, it is going to be as easy as 2 transfers. That would be a downgrade of Kane to someone in the probably 7.5 million price point. I'd probably get rid of Maddison or Foden. So we'd probably go Kane down to someone like an Nkunku, and then let's just say Foden's playing all his minutes. I'm really hoping that Foden's playing all his minutes, and Maddison is not looking that great in Spurs, and we could do something like this in 2 transfers rather than having to burn a wild card, which I think most people will need to do. You might also find, though, that this is the time when people come in with a little mini wild card. They build up 2 free transfers and then make like 3 or 4 changes for a 4 or 8 point hit in order to shuffle it around so that you can have 2 premiums back in the squad. That is all viable stuff, but if we start from the outset with 2 premiums, there is a relatively easy road to get across to Salah, considering that Salah and Kane both started at 12.5 million, and that 7.5 million price point is actually quite a cool price point. I love the players that they've chucked in at the 7.5 million range. And Nkunku looks like a really interesting player at Chelsea. Chelsea still have a great run of fixtures at that point. Nottingham Forest, Bournemouth, Aston Villa, Fulham, Burnley for the next 5 from game week 4. And so that gives us a little bit of a chance to have a look at Nkunku up front if we don't decide to start with him from the outset, and could quite easily switch across to Salah at that point. So that's the video. That's the first one back for the second season. And if you are listening to this at this point, thank you for sticking around for the whole 53 minutes of the first video back. I hope I offered a little bit more in terms of diversity and strategy to what is potentially out there in YouTube land at the moment. And if you did like the content, please do consider giving it a like. And if you are new around here and want to be notified about more FPL content coming your way throughout the season, hit that big red subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified about future content. And until next time, I'll catch you again shortly. Cheers.